please come. I need you. This is I need you.
On February 29, 2000, John Price, a 45-year-old father of 3, went to court to request a restraining order against his girlfriend, Catherine Knight. She had been harassing him after he refused to marry her. Previous confrontations between them involved both verbal and physical altercations. Concerned about the situation, John made jokes at work about potential issues if he didn't show up. The next day, John didn't appear at work, raising concerns among colleagues who were unsure whether he was joking or if something had actually happened to him. His boss tried calling him multiple times, but there was no answer. Worried, the boss decided to send someone to John's home to check on his well-being. Simultaneously, a neighbor became anxious upon noticing John's car still parked outside. Approaching the house, the neighbor knocked on the door repeatedly, but there was no response, just complete silence. Peering through the bedroom window to check if John was asleep, the neighbor saw no movement. Observing bloodstains near the entrance, the neighbor promptly called the police. Around 8 a.m. on March 1st, officers arrived, and at first glance, the house seemed normal. Despite this, they decided to enter and ensure everything was all right. What they discovered inside was described by the officers as a terrifying and unimaginable scene. John, the victim, was found inside. It turns out he knew that things would take a dark turn after getting involved with Catherine, if no one intervened. This case revolves around Catherine Mary Knight, one of Australia's most notorious killers. She was born on October 24, 1955, in Tenterfield, Australia, to Barbara Rogan and Ken Knight. Barbara, previously married to Jack Rogan, entered into a relationship with Ken, a friend of her husband, leading to their separation. Barbara left her 4 children with her ex-partner and went to live with Ken in Moore. There, they formed a new family, with Catherine and her twin sister, along with 2 more siblings born in 1959. Following the death of Jack Rogan, 2 of his children went to live with Barbara. The children grew up in a highly unfavorable environment. Ken, their father, was extremely violent and abusive, and he also struggled with serious alcohol issues. He lacked control and would physically harm the children and Barbara. My mom used to share intimate details of her life, which did not contribute positively to the situation. My children not only witnessed all of that, but I would also recount in detail everything Ken did to me, expressing my disgust towards men. Subsequently, my other children ended up emulating those behaviors and repeatedly abused Catherine. After enduring for a long time, I confided in my mom, but instead of understanding and supporting me, she didn't. They told her to stop complaining and endure what she was dealt. The abuses didn't cease until she was 11, but they left deep scars. They left her filled with insecurities and distrust, affecting every aspect of her life. She developed a solitary and simultaneously violent personality. At school, Catherine was often in a bad mood and always defended the most vulnerable, leading to constant fights, even resorting to using a knife she hid in her backpack for self-defense. Despite it all, she behaved well in the classroom. However, she was quite reserved and left school at the age of 15 without learning to read or write. She began working as a cutter in a garment factory, but it only lasted about a year, around 1971. Later, she found employment at the Aberdeen slaughterhouse, where she stood out for her knife skills. She loved her job so much that she considered it a dream job. She even hung her first set of butcher knives over her bed and would gaze at them before sleeping, which brought her great satisfaction. In 1973, Catherine's aggressive behaviors began to surface. She met her first husband, David Kellett, who was 22 years old that year. He had lost his job at a railroad company due to alcohol-related issues and sought employment at the Aberdeen slaughterhouse, where he met Kenai, who was about to turn 18. After a year of knowing each other in 1974, they decided to get married. The wedding night was memorable. They were intimate 3 times. However, when David fell asleep, Catherine became furious, considering 3 times insufficient. In a fit of rage, she attempted to strangle her husband, but this was just the beginning of a complicated relationship filled with increasingly frequent violent episodes. The last major fight occurred when Kenai was almost due to give birth. It all started because David arrived home later than usual. Instead of asking why, Catherine decided to set fire to her husband's clothes. Later, she went to the kitchen and delivered a powerful blow to his head with a frying pan, fracturing his skull. Seeing her so aggressive, David began screaming for help. A neighbor heard and called the police, who took Catherine away. However, a few hours later, they released her because her husband refused to file a complaint as their daughter, named Melissa Ann, was about to be born. In May 1976, David decided to leave Catherine due to her behavior. This greatly frustrated and depressed her, and unfortunately, she took out her anger on her daughter. Shortly after the separation, she left the baby on the train tracks on a dreadful day. Fortunately, a man searching for food rescued the baby after hearing her cries and alerted the police. That evening, when Catherine returned home, she grabbed an axe from a neighbor's yard and went out threatening people on the street, including an elderly man. The elderly man reported her to the police, and minutes later, they arrested her and took her to the psychiatric hospital in Townward. There, she was diagnosed with postpartum depression, but was discharged. A few days later, she took to the streets with her baby and a butcher knife, threatening a woman to drive her to her husband David's house. As the woman refused, Catherine cut her face several times. The victim managed to escape to a gas station where she received help, and the police were called. When they arrived, they saw Catherine waving a knife in the air, with her horrified baby in her arms. After a few minutes, they safely took her daughter and brought Catherine to a psychiatric facility for treatment. The child was placed in the care of her maternal grandparents, and David was informed that Catherine was interned in a psychiatric ward at the New South Wales Mental Institution and was sedated. On August 9, 1976, Catherine was placed under the care of her mother-in-law with the condition that she took all her medication. A few weeks later, Catherine and David resumed living together in Woodry, Kessland. David drove trucks, and Catherine worked at a dismantling plant in the Dinmore meat factory in Ipswich. However, happiness was short-lived as the couple again engaged in violent fights involving aggression with various objects. Despite it all, on March 6, 1980, Catherine and David had another daughter named Natasha Merle. Over the years in 1984, when David returned home, he found it empty. His wife and daughter had left. Catherine moved to her parents' house on a farm outside Aberdeen and returned to work at the slaughterhouse. Her violent attitude didn't allow her to stay on the farm for long, so she moved with her daughters to a rented property in Michaelbrook. A year later, back problems forced her to quit working. The government granted her a pension and provided her with housing near her daughter's school. At 30, slim, with a whole life ahead, Catherine lacked only a man. Despite appearing cheerful on the surface, she was aggressive, jealous, and possessive. Her looks allowed her to meet many men, including Dave Saunders, a 38-year-old miner. Despite being considered a good guy, attractive, and charming, he had a problem with alcohol. Despite that, the couple immediately hit it off and decided to formalize their relationship. Dave moved into Catherine's apartment. However, violent episodes soon emerged. Catherine constantly accused Saunders of having affairs with other women, leading to endless arguments. On more than one occasion, she kicked him out of her house, but the next day, she begged him to come back. The fights escalated to physical assaults. In May 1987, after an argument, Catherine killed a puppy in front of Saunders, warning him that the same fate awaited him if he had an affair. Despite the intense arguments and Catherine's strange behavior, including a suicide attempt, in June 1988, she gave birth to her third daughter named Sarah. With the arrival of a new family member, they acquired a property adorned with cow and sheep skulls, animal skins, and ox horns. Among the items hanging on the walls and beams, Catherine had a huge fork, a wooden spoon, a rake, rusty animal traps, leather coats, motorcycle jackets, boots, and a saddle. Every corner was filled with newspapers, clothes, and old books. Although this decoration made her feel good, the enjoyment was short-lived. In a fight, Catherine hit her partner with an earone on the head and stabbed him in the chest with scissors. Dave, fed up with the situation, decided it was enough and took a vacation. When she tried to find him, she couldn't, and in desperation, she cut all his clothes into pieces and threw them in the landfill. Months later, Dave returned home to see his daughter, but was surprised to learn that Catherine had gone to the police, claiming she was afraid of her husband and obtained a restraining order. Catherine didn't take long to find another lover, John Chillingworth, a 43-year-old co-worker from her previous job at the Aberdeen meat factory. In 1991, their fourth child, a boy named Eric, was born. Although many neighbors were surprised by the lack of issues with her new partner, after 3 years of the relationship, John Priest discovered that Catherine was having an affair with another man, John Priest. They decided to end their relationship, and although he was initially distressed, he later felt fortunate. John Priest became Catherine's new lover. In 1995, she moved in with him. Catherine worked in local mines, and their relationship with Priest was good, despite knowing Catherine's strong character. In 1998, she asked John to marry her, but he refused. In retaliation, Catherine recorded videos of articles Priest had taken from his workplace and sent them to his boss, although they were outdated medical kits he had picked up from the dumpster. As a consequence, John was fired after 17 years with the company. When she arrived home, they had a heated argument, and he kicked her out, telling her he wanted nothing more to do with her. Months later, they resumed the relationship, but this time he didn't allow her to move in with him, leading to more arguments and fights. Catherine defamed John by falsely claiming he had abused her daughters. In February 2000, during a heated dispute, Catherine stabbed John upon realizing that he was capable of anything. To protect himself, he sought a restraining order, but the police couldn't resolve the case due to conflicting accounts. After that, John informed his friends that if he didn't show up for work the next day, it was because Kathy had done something bad to him. When he returned home, Catherine and her children were not there, as she had sent them to spend the night with friends to reconcile with John. She prepared a romantic evening with new lingerie. Around 11 p.m., she arrived home. She had the keys. She showered and woke John for intimacy. After the act, unbeknownst to him, she had strategically placed knives around the house. While he slept, Catherine got up, grabbed a knife, and stabbed him. John woke up, tried to run and defend himself, but she overpowered him and stabbed him more than 37 times. When the police entered the house, they saw bloodstains on the walls and floor, a large pool of blood in the hallway. The scene was shocking. An officer discovered what appeared to be a curtain, and upon removing it, realized it was human skin. Once John was lifeless, Catherine removed all the skin, including the face, ears, and scalp, creating a macabre suit that she hung like a curtain. She then cut the skinned head and cooked it in a pot with vegetables. She also sliced the buttocks and placed them on the oven tray like steaks. On the dining table, she set up tableware and papers with the names of Priest's children for them to occupy their places, as she planned to serve them the meal. John's body was found in a supine position next to two 17-centimeter knives over a large pool of blood, legs crossed and one arm extended. Nearby, Catherine was unconscious because she had attempted suicide by taking pills. She was rushed to the hospital and woke up on March 4th. The police questioned her about the events, but she claimed not to remember anything from that night. Her lawyers argued that she was not legally fit to stand trial, requesting a psychiatric evaluation. After 3 evaluations by different psychiatrists, they concluded that she was sane at the time of the act and aware of her actions, although she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which involves difficulty handling emotions, making her impulsive and insecure. In October 2001, during the trial, Catherine pleaded not guilty, claiming amnesia. The defense argued that her issue was not a mental illness, but simply a lack of concern for doing wrong. Her emotional instability was not a lack of knowledge of right or wrong. In other words, she did things because she enjoyed them, regardless of the consequences. Finally, feeling cornered, she pleaded guilty to the murder of John Priest. On November 8th of that year, Judge Barry O'Coffey sentenced her to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Currently, she is housed in the Civil Water Women's Correctional Center. In prison, Kathy is known as Nana. She is considered kind and gentle, acting as a peacemaker who avoids intense arguments. She has not exhibited problematic behavior in prison and has served as an example for other inmates. But despite that, many are aware that they shouldn't mess with her,